We've all heard enough of everyone's best practices in software development. And today we're here with Julia Evans to learn about her worst practice. So Julia, please tell us more about yourself and what kind of software you write.
Sure. So I've been programming for maybe 20 years, I realized, almost 20 years, but maybe 10 years as a job. Right now, so what I'm really interested in programming is usually the things underneath the programming language. So like with how you have like computer networking, right? And how they talk to each other, or how the program talks to the operating system and like what the operating system is doing. And right now the software I write is mostly sort of like tools to inspect what your computer is doing. So I was working recently on something to explore a floating point.
That's great.
And integers and how those work.
Deep stuff for sure. So tell us, what is your worst practice?
My worst practice is not reading the documentation. So my favorite way when I find any piece of software or something that I want to use, instead of looking at the documentation and reading it, I'll maybe look for one example, and then copy and paste that example and then start running it. So I feel like it's like don't read, just try, like school of reading documentation. And then if I have a specific question, I'll go back to it and be like, okay, with my specific question, like what's the answer to that? But it's a very like kind of like surgical strike style of reading the documentation. And I think this works really well if it's a situation that I'm pretty comfortable in. Like, let's say I'm learning an HTTP library. Like, I've used a lot of HTTP libraries. And so, like, probably I more or less know what to do. I can figure it out just by guessing, more or less. And then I can look up things as I need them. But this does not work if I'm in, like, kind of more alien territory, right? And I will apply the exact same strategy, to be clear. Like, I won't, like, adapt my strategy. When I pair with my partner, he'll be like, Julia, I'm begging you to open the documentation. Like it drives him
just out of frustration.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So then if you don't have a good example from an open source project or a library that you want to build on, is that becomes a big problem for you because you have no way to start? Like you have a completely blank canvas. Is that where you struggle?
I think it's more like with like common gotchas, for example, or things that you really do need to know. And then I'll have to, I think it's usually actually possible to find an example. Like, cause there's like the documentation, there's Stack Overflow, there's the tests, there's like, there's a website called grep.app where you can search like everything on GitHub. And I feel like I can usually figure out an example most of the time.
And so the whole like read the manual or RTFM, that kind of thing, that's the you've given up. You actually have to go read the manual, kind of admit defeat kind of situation. For you.
I feel like it's more of a last resort for me.
Got it. And how rare is that? I mean, is it like when's the last time that you actually read the manual from the beginning?
Like the whole thing?
Yeah, or just like I want to learn this tool.
Chunk.
I'm going to start with the manual. Like that's never.
I don't know. It's hard to think about. Like sometimes, I don't know. Like I think really like starting at the beginning. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's great.
I will say that I have friends who are really into reading and who will like read a lot, and that works really well for them too.
Gotcha.
So I don't think that there's like I'm not going to say that like my way is the best way,
Right.
I think
it's more of a learning style thing.
Yeah, I think it's more of a learning style thing, and it more or less works for me most of the time.
That's great.
But I think something completely different could work for you too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing your worst practice with us, and it was great to hear about.
Thanks for having me.